Welcome to Resistance Radio, everybody. I'm Frank Musella, and happy to report that baby Musella, Oliver Nakayama Musella, was born this past Tuesday. Mama and baby are both happy and healthy and home from the hospital, so very happy here at Resistance Radio. Also happy here because we have a very special guest on the podcast today. Joining us today is Zach Beecher, an Army veteran from the 82nd Airborne, former venture capitalist, and currently running as a congressional candidate for the Democratic primary in New Jersey's 11th district to replace current governor and former Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. Welcome to the podcast, Zach.
Frank, it is great to be here. We had two new dads in new and uncharted terrain here on the show today, and excited for you, excited for Oliver, your family, and deeply impressed that you're here with us today. So thanks for the opportunity, and it's great to be with you here today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Pleasure to do it. And yeah, thank you for joining me. I understand you have a 1-year-old at home. Is that right?
We do. Little Pierce, we just celebrated 14 months. He was born on Veterans Day in November 2024. So he's been keeping us honest now for just over a year.
Oh my, that's adorable. And you'll never forget that birthday. Any advice for a new dad, especially for getting through the newborn phase?
I would say the try to slow down and enjoy it. There is a sense of awe, I think, when you really can slow yourself down and consider this chapter of your life that you're in, the impact that you'll be able to have on little Oliver, this new chapter for your wife and you as you think about what it means to build a family, and the traditions that you'll be able to carry forward and the traditions that you'll be able to create. There is nothing like being a father and a spouse and having the chance to build that future. I think it's the most awe-inspiring thing that you can do.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. Stop to smell the roses, but maybe not the diapers.
Do your best to avoid the diapers. They are as bad as you think.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. Maybe you could introduce yourself to our audience and tell us about your background.
Yeah, of course. And again, Frank, it's great to see you again, going to undergrad and exploring those uncharted territories together too. Were pretty amazing. But no, who am I? I grew up here in the district, in a small town called Randolph, New Jersey. Son of a police officer who served for 36 and a half years, retired as a chief, and a social worker who started a nonprofit that was originally three social workers around a table and is now serving thousands of families across northern New Jersey. And so growing up, for me, service was really the family business, solving people's problems, addressing these challenges, thinking through what those solutions could be. They were what we talked about at the kitchen table, and I saw very early that these types of roles aren't just jobs; they're a calling, and that calling, I think, beckoned to me as well. And I went to college at Princeton. Every admissions counselor makes a mistake. I was lucky enough to have one make a mistake with me and slip my way in there on a ROTC scholarship. And it was that experience of being humbled and learning. Commissioned into the Army. From there, went to the 82nd Airborne Division. I guess the Army heard that I had a fear of heights, so they said, "You'll be a paratrooper, my son." And so I had the chance to fall out of a couple perfectly good aircraft down there in North Carolina. But more than that, I had the chance to really have the privilege of serving alongside some of the most exceptional Americans across this country. And they came from every orientation, every income bracket, every background, folks that had immigrated here quite literally for the opportunity to serve, and people who families had been here since before the Mayflower. And, I think having that moment to share in the dedication to that mission together, deploying forward to Iraq, it really, I think, shaped me into the man that I am today. And when I was in Iraq, I learned a lot about, what does it mean to solve problems at the speed of need? And how does the speed of battle differ from the circumstances, the challenges, and the scale of the issues that we face at home? And the reality is that battle measures your mistakes in blood and treasure. And that sense of urgency, we get to do problem solving I call it the speed of battle. We were innovating at the speed of battle to create outcomes that could facilitate the mission that was before us. And that sense of urgency, that sense of problem solving had me hooked. And that took me after active duty, where I served, and we ultimately liberated a city of nearly 2 million people in Mosul, that was under the brutal occupation of ISIS. I knew that after that chapter had closed, I wanted to take that sense of urgency and start solving ever bigger problems. And I wanted to see how the same way in Iraq, where we had taken mission, technology, community, team, and put it together to drive this incredible outcome, I knew that we could do that back home. And so I've had the privilege of working across healthcare, countering human trafficking, climate, to energy, to national security tech, to really try to put those pieces back together and move with that same sense of urgency. And, I think right now, that area where we have the greatest urgency and the most kind of stubborn problems is in the public sector. And so while I've always been inspired by entrepreneurs and the grit and the belief that you can change the world, I believe where we need to really change things now lies in government. And so that's why I took a step back from the venture and the innovation community. As much as I love it, I love this country more than anything else. And I knew this was the place where I needed to be to help drive and solve those problems. So, Frank, that's a little bit about me at length, and I think draws into why I saw this opportunity to serve and continue to serve as so important to me, to stand up and throw our hat in the ring here, for this special election.
Gotcha. No, there's a lot of threads I'd, love to pull on there. I know that you're a relative newcomer to politics, so could you tell us a little bit about the fresh perspective that you bring to the political arena, and maybe something Barack Obama described as the fierce urgency of now? Like, why make this run for Congress, and what do you hope to achieve with it?
Yeah, there's so much in there to unpack, right? One of my favorite phrases from my time in the 82nd Airborne Division was, I had a leader who used to say that you've got to run to the sound of the guns, and that's really what you're expected to do, right? What's an airborne division expected to do? You're expected to exit an aircraft in the dark of night, form up in enemy territory, and work with your fellow paratroopers to hold that ground and carry the mission forward. And to make sure that you can hold that ground and carry the mission forward, you have to actually move to where the problem is, and you've got to do so with haste, and you've got to do so with that sense of urgency. And for me, my career has really been around like what's the sound of the guns right now? Coming out of Princeton, I always felt like the global war on terror and the national security risk that we were navigating was the issue where I could contribute. When I got out of active duty, I felt like taking technology and applying it to big public sector problems was where that problem was, from healthcare to energy to national security. And now it's very hard for me, and I think it's especially personal now too, Frank, with a son, to think about what is the future that I will offer him, that our generation will hand from ours to his. And I don't know that challenge is anywhere more acutely felt than in the public sector. And when you look around, there are fine candidates in this race, but many of them come from prior backgrounds that are no surprise to politics. This is not their first run. And for us, we fundamentally believe where the Democrats have thrived is where they've leaned into new voices, new leadership, new ideas, but they've done so with a pragmatism that's principled. And my entire background has been trying to take a principled but a pragmatic approach to leading, building teams, driving solutions to scale. And I looked at my characteristics. I thought about my community. These people are my neighbors, my family, my friends. And I felt that stepping forward into this breach was a way that I could add my voice to the room to drive the results that I believe that our community, and frankly, this entire nation, deserve, which is affordable access to healthcare, housing that doesn't bankrupt you, and the opportunity to believe that your children's future is going to be brighter than the future that you stepped into.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think you touched a little bit on it, but what are some of the big things that you hope to accomplish if you were elected to Congress?
Well, I think the question here is, this is a special election, and the dynamic of how you set the platform for like where you believe the nation must go strategically, but also where the nation can go tactically in the next 8 months. We're going to be, if successful, um, we're going to be filling a seat that has about an 8 month runway left in its term from April after the general forward. Uh, that means that we're not going to be in a fundamentally altered house. So that means that I have to consider what we can do with the math as it's currently set, and then think through, building the right momentum and platform to win again in November for a full term that would start in January of 27. What can you then do at that point? And that's where we believe fundamentally the math can change. So I split that out because I think it's important to think about both the special and the general that we're thinking about. Listen, on the special, I want to be focused on results. I don't think anybody should go to Washington for retweets or more rhetoric. I think we have plenty of that and everyone's tired of it. I think where we need to drive results in New Jersey, especially in the 11th, is around kind of three core topics. It's transportation, it's tax, and it's healthcare. On transportation, the Gateway Tunnel has been victim to how many different punitive attacks from the administration just because we're a blue state. On the tax side, the SALT cap deduction has been almost surgically driven at what we're doing here in New Jersey, simply because we're a blue state. And on healthcare, we've seen 17 Republicans break away from a no sense, absolute terrible policy that's being proposed by the Trump administration to allow ACA subsidies to expire. These are areas where I know that we can work even within the confines of the math that we face to drive real results. Funding the Gateway Tunnel with appropriations that are dedicated, driving tax deductions on SALT to be replaced, and then ultimately enabling the expansion of the ACA subsidies. Those are tactical items that we can strike at. I think further there is we've got to give voice and we've got to give action around some of the dynamics on everything from DHS funding, which comes up on 30 Jan, to some of the other areas where the administration, like Greenland, has expanded its reach in ways that are frankly unprecedented and need to be confronted immediately. And we could talk about that too. But on the strategic side, I think we've got to build out moonshots for housing. We've got to think about the ways in which we navigate in the world. And we have to limit and roll back the tariffs that the Senate has already voted that they want to draw back on. We've got to limit war powers, which the Senate has again also nearly just avoided voting to roll back on the president. These are strategic placements, limiting the executive and empowering the Congress through Article 1, where we can begin to get these moonshot programs in place to make a material difference in Americans' lives. So I think it's just important that we walk and chew bubblegum on both what we can do now and what we can set up to accomplish in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I think that's actually a very pragmatic way of looking at it. First, what you can accomplish in the minority as a member of, it's about 218 Republicans to 13-ish Democrats. So, unfortunately, in the minority party for now, but that might change in the next midterm. So, what can you accomplish in the interim? I would love to hear a little bit about your core values. I think when people think of the military, they associate it with skewing conservatives. So, what are the core values you have that made you not just run for Congress, but run specifically as a Democrat?
I behind me on the wall here is John F. Kennedy, and I grew up an Irish Catholic Democrat. And what made me proud to be a Democrat was this idea that it's a big tent. It's a noisy tent. There's a lot of different viewpoints. But at the end of the day, it fundamentally serves the idea that a government should be by, with, and for its people. You think about the Great Society legislation, you think about some of the greatest improvements to the social safety net. these are setting the fair standards of play to improve the outcome and improve the baseline for every American. And I think what we have to get back to is building a government that's by, with, and for its people. We look at the hope of the Obama administration and what they were able to accomplish. So much of that was also realizing that a government can't just be with, by, by, with, and for. It also has to move at the speed of its citizens' needs. And so I think for me, the military has always been about those types of elements. It is a mission first, but a people first organization. The military is an organization that covers your healthcare, it covers your childcare, it enables access to programs that enable you to focus on the best way that you personally can contribute to that mission. And I think a government that's by, with, and for, a government that moves at that speed of need, it's facilitating the ability for Americans to be the most full version of themselves and who they hope to be, so that they can contribute and strengthen who we are as a country and who we are to the world. And I think by doing that, we're great Democrats and we're great Americans. And I think at the end of the day, veterans, people don't want to be judged for their opinions. And I think where the Democrats have to do better, and this is something that's very important to me, is that Democrats have to be more accepting of different viewpoints, that they have to be understanding and have the conversation, that the time of purity tests needs to go away. This is a big tent to be by, with, and for the people. The people make up a lot of people. And you have to consider the different viewpoints and perspectives. And you've got to know that, like, sometimes it takes work to shape a room from a cacophony into a symphony. But it's the work and it's the outcome that matters. And I think, for me, the reason that you get into these types of positions, and I think, anybody who gets into government agrees on this, I hope, is that there's a mission at your heart that you want to serve the people that you're out there to represent. And I just come back all the time to the concept of e pluribus unum, which is one of our founding phrases. And it's this idea that out of many we are one. And I think the Democrats thrive when they remember that out of many we are one. But that doesn't mean that it should be purely by litmus test. I think we've got to be able to make that space. And so, the last thing I would say on it is, as a veteran in particular, I think part of the idea of being a veteran is you got to be pragmatic. Your principles matter, your oath matters. You have to be pragmatic about the way in which you move the ball up the field, and that will be judged by what we accomplish. And so I think Article 1 on the Constitution lays out that the Congress is essentially the greatest deal-making body ever contemplated. And so we've got to get back to the way that we can be pragmatic but principled to drive the deals that drive the results, the demonstrative results that improve Americans' lives. And I think to be a successful Democrat, you got to remember the small d in democracy, and understand that takes conversation, that takes time, and that takes the effort to move the ball up the field.
Got it. Let's switch gears a little bit and get more tactical. So could you tell our audience a bit more about the specific primary you're running in, maybe the schedule? Tell us about your district, et cetera, and how people can support you.
100%. So we are 18 days away from our special primary, but who's counting, Frank? Governor Murphy set the special primary for the special election on February 5th. The election currently has 11 candidates running on the Democratic side and one candidate running on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, we've got a variety of candidates with a variety of different backgrounds. Former Congressman Tom Malinowski, County Commissioner Brendan Gill, former New Jersey Working Families Party Executive Director Ana Lilia Mejia, Lieutenant Governor Tahisha Way. I think Darcy Drager, who's the Morris County Democratic Committee lead, said that they feel that they have an embarrassment of riches in terms of candidates. And it's been humbling to stand up alongside each of these candidates. I think what we would argue differentiates ourselves fundamentally is that we're that new voice. We're the blend of experience from the nonprofit sector to the innovation sector to the military that's focused on getting things done. So that's a little bit about who's in it. The special general will take place on April 16th. So that's going to be a competition between whoever wins this and Joe Hathaway, who's the mayor of actually my hometown, ironically, Randolph. And whoever wins that will then have to go for a primary again in June and then another general in November. So it will be a busy year for the winner. Where do we see things? What makes up the district? I think is probably a good next question.
Mhm.
So there's 3 counties. There's Essex County, which includes towns like Montclair, Glenridge, South Orange. There's Morris County, which includes where we live now, Morristown, my hometown, Randolph, places like Parsippany, Dover, Madison, and Chatham. And then you have Passaic County, which includes places like Little Falls and Woodland Park. In terms of the voting public, it's an extremely well-educated district. We're about 35 to 50 miles as the crow flies from New York City. There's a lot of professional services across the voting public here. Now, turnout, we are hoping to drive as high as we can, and we hope, especially with all the quality candidates and such an important moment of time, that we'll be able to drive really effective turnout across the district. But that remains to be seen. And in terms of the kind of dispersal of those voters, you get about 55% of them in Essex, 45% of them or so in Morris, and then depending on turnout, around 5% or so in Passaic. And so with all those pieces, you've got folks kind of targeting their strategies and where to reach out. And our perspective here has been we're going to talk to as many voters as we can. We're going to build as broad a coalition as possible. We're proud to have one of the largest federal, state, and local workers unions backing us. National Association of Government Employees, we got Vote Vets, With Honor, former Senator Bob Kerrey. We've got a lot of momentum behind us that we're excited about. How can you help us? We are always looking for new ideas. We're looking for feedback. We're looking for folks that want to help us get out the vote. I think if you're interested in seeing a principled and pragmatic veteran in Congress that can help drive the conversation, but also the country forward, that's more interested in results, we'd love to have you alongside us in this effort to see what we can do.
All right. And ZachBeecher.com. That's ZachBeecher.com. I'll throw that out there. Let's skip ahead to the lightning round. I wanted to ask you, I guess, your stances on a couple of specific issues. I know you mentioned SALT and tax policy and healthcare already. Affordability is one of the themes of your campaign. Could you talk a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, I think, listen, affordability means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think in our district, a lot of it comes to transportation and tax. People feel like they're being kind of penalized twice. And I think we need to focus on ways that we bring down the costs there. But I also think we need to find ways to align federal funding to NJ Transit in order to improve the services and systems there. I think there's a new generation. There's our generation, Frank, and those coming up behind us feel like housing is something that's out of reach. I think we need a housing moonshot in order to figure out new tax policies and incentive policies to augment both supply, but also create circumstances that make it easier for folks to buy into home ownership. And I think, on more persistent programs, I think ACA subsidy expansion needs to continue to occur, but I think we need to really think about the ways that innovation and research and development can attack certain cost drivers within the healthcare economy so that we can consider not just from the healthcare cost, but the system of systems that drives those costs up year over year. And that's everything from hospital equipment to medical manufacturing costs to the drug discovery cost process. What are ways that we can leverage technology and bring our best and brightest to help bring those cost points down to make healthcare more affordable for everyone? So when I think about affordability, it runs the gamut, but I think those are some of the priority topics that have been very front of mind for us.
Sure.
Go ahead, sorry.
Presidential use of force. I know you're a veteran and care deeply about this issue, so we've gone into Venezuela. We're talking about Greenland. Could you share your perspective there quickly?
The Congress is the closest representation of the people as it's intended in the Constitution. The Congress has an incredibly important responsibility in the use of force. It's the most serious, it's the most considerable power that the president has, and the Congress is built to be the check on that power. We were extremely disappointed to see the War Powers Resolution Act vote fail earlier this week. And we have been very clear in our public statements about our concerns, our criticism, and our condemnation about the unilateral action that happened in Venezuela. There's no tears shed for Maduro, but I can tell you that the president of the United States shouldn't have the unilateral power to declare war. And we're seeing what the risk of that is in Greenland right now, as people are openly commenting and questioning whether or not NATO will exist by the year's end. That should be unimaginable. It should be unacceptable to every American. And it's something that we need to work with urgency to resolve and limit. And we've been heartened to see some in the Senate and the House crafting legislation to limit the president's ability to do that. So cannot emphasize strongly enough how serious we need to take these concerns.
Great. And by the way, give me a shout if you need to run, but couple to go. ICE raids in cities like Minneapolis, perspective there?
Yeah, my dad, I'd mentioned it before. We spoke at a protest yesterday. We were at a protest on Tuesday night. My dad was in law enforcement for 36 and a half years. Americans have a right to have to live their lives free of fear. We've seen statistically year over year, month over month rather, that those who are being deported are not violent criminals. And the justification for these raids has been weak at best. And instead, we have seen these as politically targeted and eroding trust in communities and institutions and in the police. This is not law enforcement. We've been frankly horrified by the militarization of these activities and these operations. And I think we really need to challenge through the power of the purse the ability of ICE to be able to conduct these types of operations. And I think no agency in the federal government should ever be free of oversight, especially when they're operating in the streets as these are right now. The last thing I would say is when you erode trust, you erode the ability for communities to continue to move forward together. Every human relationship moves at the speed of trust from you and your friends all the way out to the way the government works with its citizens. Things move at the speed of trust. And the further we dig a hole and erode core trust, the more difficult it will be to address these challenges as a nation and to remember that we are in this boat together.
Great. One last policy question. My wife wanted me to ask this one. I'll ask about AI. I know that we've got Grok running around undressing women and children and ChatGPT driving people into psychosis. How would you balance the need for innovation at the speed of battle, as you call it, with the need to put guardrails around this new technology?
I think responsible innovation is something that the United States has always worked to improve and worked to responsibly have discussions around. I think we've seen a lack of enforcement around some of the social media companies where there's opportunity already on the books to press on their ability to publish and continue to publish some of the pieces that they are. Publishing houses are not free of responsibility for the content that they publish. Courts have been clear about that, nor should tech companies be. I think in terms of AI, it's around considering where it's being applied and what the outcomes are. Child sexual exploitative material should be an unacceptable reality anywhere. When those types of programs are able to conduct that and populate that, that type of effort should be unacceptable categorically to every single American, and not rewarded with a contract to now be on all of the Department of Defense's systems. I think it's been quite shocking to watch the cabal of those who have cozied to the president win these contracts despite serious misgivings about the efficacy of the technology itself. And I think that what we have to do is consider and balance what risks we are willing to take. And this, again, is where I'm concerned about the abdication of Congress's oversight responsibility. Where are the hearings on these types of technologies? Where are the hearings on what direction this country wants to go? Where is the contemplation of policy happening about what risks the American people are willing to stomach? You haven't seen it. You haven't seen it on the Hill. You haven't seen it in the White House. These technologies can be extraordinary powers for good, engines for good, but it ultimately comes down to the way that we discuss, we debate, and we consider and decide what we are comfortable with as a nation. And the government has largely abdicated its responsibility in doing that. And I think that would be a absolute priority for us as we move ahead.
Great. And then one last question just for fun, and I'll let you get back to the campaign trail. You were our class president at Princeton, I believe all 4 years, if memory serves me right. But
For
what did
my
you learn?
yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe for yours, Ray.
Is there anything you learned about governance from that time that you think you could apply as a congressman?
I think the most amazing thing about being an undergrad at Princeton is just how humbling it was, right? Talk about like the most awesome experience. Like my grandmother immigrated to this country in 1953 and spent most of her life as a dishwasher. And for her grandson to be at Princeton, for her grandson to be in a leadership position there, it was something that I never quite. I just was kind of in awe of the American dream that I had the fortune to live. And the thing that I always remembered about Princeton was you never have to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to figure out how you can bring great teams together. And I think for me, having the privilege to think about the way that you build teams and that you can convene folks that are extraordinarily talented and the good that you can do by bringing those folks together. I mean, it's a lesson that's never left me. I took it forward into the Army. I've taken it forward into the private sector, and it's something that I intend to take forward into Congress. And that at the end of the day, everything is a people business. And the first idea is rarely the best, and the teams are often the drivers of the accomplishments that we all can celebrate. And I think that was something I began to learn at Princeton and have continued to learn and try and been humbled in my efforts to continue to try to apply that. So great question.
All right. On that note, I'll let you get back to it. Thank you so much, Zach, for coming on the podcast today.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure, my privilege, and give Ali and Mama a hug from us, and we're wishing you all best. And thanks again for the time. This has been great.
Will do. This has been Resistance Radio. Frank Musella and our guest, Zach Beecher. Thanks, everybody.